Hi, my name's Sam,
And I'm Andrew.
and this is Teen Talk Politics. On today's episode, we're talking about the school system. So yeah, since school's out, we've decided our first episode will be on the school system, primarily student loans, teacher pay, free education, and standardized testing. So Andrew, what are your thoughts on student loans?
I feel like for student loans, the banks, they are the only ones in the situation that improve. Students basically don't get anything out of it because they're going to have to later pay it off plus interest. Banks just make money off of it, and I feel like if college was free, not all college should be free. I don't think graduate school should be free. However, the
Yeah, that
basic
makes
college
sense. Yeah.
to get your degree should be free. Um, mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because I think the United States as a whole could benefit from more progression in industry as as employees wouldn't have to like would be able to be more creative and make more stuff if they're not weighed down by the weight that is money. So it's a big issue that divides Democrats and Republicans today, I think, right? Because some I dare to say a bit more radical Democrats believe that student loan debt should be relieved, right? But it's like, what are we gonna do after that, right? So
Yeah, because we have progressives like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders in the Senate and several in the House that want to relieve all students of their student debt because there's billions of dollars. I don't know the number, but it's a lot of money.
yeah,
And for the government to spend that much money would be a major step in the right direction. However, we
Yeah.
don't have a easy way to get that money.
yeah,
I will say slashing military budget. For example, we're not in a war right now. Why are we spending this much on military?
yeah. That's like it's almost 40% of our annual budget. So it's just,
And I feel like if we slash that, we would have not a lot of money for many things, not just the education system, but a lot of other bills that President Biden is trying to get through. Of course, that's not what today's episode is about, but
yeah.
I think this all connects to it.
So yeah, and so with student loans, I feel like something from the opposition, the Republicans agree that student loans should remain in contact to not benefit the banks per se. Well, like, that's exactly what it is, but to keep the system working because student you can't just think Republicans believe that student loans it's real money, right? Like, college is expensive for both the colleges and students, and so it should stay that way. And so I think that's mostly what the opposition believes. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that private colleges, there's nothing you can do about private colleges.
Yeah, because they're private schools, right?
But the public schools, they get paid by the taxes, because they are public schools like elementary and middle, except you're not paying for that. You're only paying for the public colleges. But students have to pay along with the taxes that are also paying for the college, if that makes any sense. So the amount of money that's going into college with the government
Yeah.
plus actual students that are paying, I think is the right amount of money. But I think if the government just pushes a little bit more money, I don't think the students would have to pay anything.
Yeah, I think
That
like
they
yeah,
get
right? Like
education.
if we just cut a bit of the military budget and we sent a bit more of that to education, and because taxes are there to benefit the people, right? To make our country run smoothly. And so why don't we just put it back in to make our society a bit more functioning, right? Like, we could have a better system of education where we have more professionalized and workers being more creative out in the workplace to create better things for the future of America.
Yeah, like back to your point about taxes. I don't pay taxes, but when I start paying taxes, I'm gonna think of it as when you're renting an apartment. that is you're paying the person that owns the apartment complex to live in that space. You're paying the government to live in that country. And I think if you have the money to be able to pay taxes, you should be paying taxes. And like I said, the taxes, they'll benefit other people, right?
Yeah, they'll benefit the economy, they'll benefit the workers.
And the amount of taxes that we already pay, why can't we just move around money? So college can be free for the most part for students that are paying thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, just per student, basically. Just thousands of dollars per student to go to college, get a college degree so he can make more money for his family, future family, depending on their situation, to get a good job.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be able to get without a college degree.
Great. So speaking of payment, our next segment is teacher pay. What are your thoughts?
It's kind of crazy because America is one of the lowest paying. How do I phrase this? And just in general, teachers get paid less here in America than a lot of first world countries. And a police officer gets paid about as much as a teacher, which you can argue that a teacher should be paid less than a police officer. But that's not what the episode's about. But anyways, a teacher, I feel like just in general should be paid more, because not only are we losing teachers right now because they're leaving the workforce, whether they're getting retired and there's not the younger generation to fill them in because they don't want to be teachers. They're like, okay, you have to spend this much work, but you don't get paid for what you actually do.
Yeah, it's like most teachers have to get a degree and go beyond just like...
Well, basically all teachers,
Yeah, and then... And also, going back to history, like if you think about ancient Greek, ancient Rome, basically any time that isn't modern history, teachers were revered as, professors, revered as high class, intelligent, smart, wise, important, influential figures of society who were meant to benefit the people and spread education and prosperity where they taught. And so why would you want to take away why do you want to take away educators' jobs with the looming distance of low pay, even though teachers are responsible for the next generation of American workers?
Yeah, because the whole point of getting education is so that the next generation doesn't have to learn everything back again from start. They need someone that already knows everything to pass their knowledge down, and that's the whole point of education. But if you don't have enough money to be paying these people, and that's their job to teach the younger generation, so we have a new generation of workers, then no wonder people are leaving this workforce and going on to other occupations. So I feel like a lot of money needs to be moved around. And we were talking just about colleges just a few minutes ago. A lot of money needs to be moved around for education. I feel like we need to spend a lot more money on education because our next generation will depend on education basically all the way through school, all 12 years up until high school, and then if they want to go further and go to college.
Yeah, and also, like, why... So, in the education system, and basically anywhere throughout modern society, the student is only as good as the teacher, right? And so if the teacher is not professionalized because there's no hardworking, dedicated professional teachers anymore, then how are you going to expect the next generation to be hardworking, smart, intelligent citizens that will lead America into the future? Because
and another thing I want to point out is that, like we said before, teachers have to go to college. They have to spend all this money assuming their parents don't pay for college and they will have this student debt that they will basically be paying for the rest of their lives. And that's another reason that I feel like college, for the most part, should be free. I feel like graduate school is too much, like I said before. For it to be free, I think people should be paying for that. However, just to get a college degree should be free. And in general, being a teacher makes you pay less on average than, I think this is common knowledge, but teachers make less on average than any other college degree job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, why are you going back to your student loan argument, like, why are you expecting the teachers go through battling student loans for the rest of their life because they don't have enough pay? So why do you expect them to go through college just to not get a sustainable paycheck? And then also, why do you expect teachers to want to work if they're only getting $70,000 a year? Like,
and I feel like the only people that are now in the workforce for teaching are people that truly enjoy their job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any reason for a teacher to be teaching unless they were happy at the occupation they currently hold, because I know there's several jobs that people don't like doing. It just pays significantly more than other jobs that they would want to do. And I feel like that's the only thing that are pushing teachers to continue teaching.
Yeah, and props to those teachers who continue to work because they love their students, they love their job, and they love benefiting the community. Because without these types of people, we could lead into a dark age of the Americas where students don't know where then the future workers don't know. For example, future engineers don't know how to find the circumference of a circle, it's a scary prospect to see as the world is losing teachers due to the pandemic and underfunding, that it could be very dangerous for our future if we don't start pushing and moving some money around to benefit the teachers.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because like you said, the pandemic is pushing a lot of teachers out of work, and the teachers have had to spend extra hours because of the pandemic, online school, planning lessons that they're not used to doing online, because a lot of lessons are going to be only being able to be useful while they're in the classroom, and not being in the classroom, they have to reinvent it almost, but just on the computer for students that are at home. And that's a lot of work for a teacher that doesn't get paid what they're actually working.
Mm-hmm. So on to our next segment about especially talking about moving money around. Our next segment is free education. This goes hand in hand with our first segment of the student loan debt, where if we had free education, do you think it would benefit the nation as a whole for more students to be able to pass through college and higher education, or would it just be too costly for the economy?
Well, I think that on the argument of costly to the economy, I feel like it wouldn't help the economy. I don't think it would hurt it enough for it to be a big problem, personally, because I feel like it's important enough that having it being free, college being free, should be prioritized.
Mm-hmm. Because how are we spending this much money on the military when our professionalized workers at home, and actually in the military as well, don't have a college degree and some of them haven't even made it through high school? Like, how are we expecting to have a better economy, a better workforce, if workers of free education, if workers in the future don't get a good enough opportunity to serve a good job?
Yeah.
Because
go
ahead.
I feel like having the free education just opens up a lot of windows for people. Whether it's right after college, they don't have to immediately put away a bunch of money paying off their student loans, and they can spend that on other things for like their kids and just getting vacations almost, which it's very privileged to be able to do that, but I feel like that's a good opportunity for people
to
that don't want to have to be paying off their student debt.
Yeah, and just to relax.
Want to live their life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, do we want the next generation to be stupid and depressed, or do we want the next generation to, well, in the argument of typical conservatives, I'm not going this for all conservatives, but in the argument of that, I believe that they believe that if we spend too much money on free education, that the future generations could be living in poverty. So it's a delicate balance, right? Like, what money do we shift around if we want free education, and how much money should we shift around? Because if we shift around too much money from like other necessary branches, do you think that the United States could go into another state of poverty, or do you think that we could find a fine line that would help increase productivity in this nation?
Yeah, because speaking of moving around money, lately there's been a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests, like last summer, where it's defund the police. And this would be another example of how they want to move around money. Whether or not you agree with that statement, that's not what the episode is, but moving around money, let's say we defund the police, just hypothetical. We move that, and then we move that to education. Yes, we will have a smaller workforce in terms of police officers, but it would help a lot with our education and paying teachers, getting free college, moving the military budget. Yes, our military will be smaller. We'll be spending less on our military. We would probably be less prepared if we ever go to war with a country. Probably the chances of going to war right now are low, purely because we're a superpower and no one wants to get into a war with a superpower.
Yeah, and we're still going to remain we're still going to remain a superpower, whether or not we have 5 nukes or 10,000 nukes. Like, whether or not we have 500 tanks or 5,000, right? Like, we're still going to remain a superpower because of our strong economy and strong workforce.
Yeah, and we have the largest GDP in the entire world.
Yeah, and boosting that won't hurt the military, but boosting that won't hurt the military. It'll only benefit. It won't hurt the military, but it could even benefit because of more professionalized workers creating better technologies that help keep our troops safe, and that help the people at home live a bit more prosperously, right?
Well, I think the argument against that is, yes, if you spend more money in education pulling away from the military, it will make people smarter, just in general, because more people can go to college because they don't necessarily have to afford it because it's free. But this expensive technology that they're developing would also cost the government because they would have to buy it. And if you defund the military, then you can't afford that technology.
Yeah, well, but I think what more liberal Democrats are believing is that if we push for a better economy via better education and more free education, back to our point, that we could not only boost the economy, but boosting the economy will also result in boosting the economy and making more professionalized workers will result in better funding, not funding, but better workers for the military who can create safer weapons. So that's more the liberal Democratic side, right?
Yeah, and I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be the military. That's just an obvious one to pull money from. But there's a lot of other things that we can pull money out of. And I think that's about time for our last section, and this is standardized testing. And Sam, do you have any thoughts on standardized testing?
I think this is kind of a not too much of a controversial opinion, but I think standardized testing are meant to benefit the average. They're meant to benefit the majority, right? Like, the majority of people probably don't have learning disabilities. The majority of people probably speak English in the United States. But as we've learned throughout history, if you don't benefit everyone, just because you have the majority doesn't make it right? Like for example, like if we don't, like, having the majority people benefit by standardized testing doesn't mean we can have the other side who has struggles with standardized testing. Doesn't mean that we can't benefit them too, because if we judge someone based on a certain criteria, there's always going to be variables, right? Like, there's always going to be variables, like whether or not that this test was, like, whether or not, like, they have dyslexia, whether or not they speak another language, right? Like, there's always going to be other variables that are going to be harder, that aren't going to be known when you create the test, and aren't going to be visible when the test results come in. And as a student, you can see this very clearly. And so, yeah, it's a big issue.
Well, I think for the standardized testing, it's weird because a lot of what colleges think of you comes from one test. Possibly two, depending if you take the SAT and the ACT.
Yeah.
And doing good on two tests, basically, will define you whether or not you get into a good college.
Which,
of course, this also can be to your main grades as well.
Yeah.
But if you do terrible on the SAT, you probably won't get into a good college.
Yeah, and it's dumb how most of your grade is made up by standardized testing, right? Like, not like in at least the school that I go to, right? At least 50% of my grade was made up by testing this year, right? Like, it's a big deal. Like, a testing can either mean I passed this grade or not. Like, 2 tests can define if I passed the quarter or not. So it's a big deal, right? Like, if you don't, like, if you're not aware of what you're doing, it's kind of an issue. Like, if you're not on the flip side of the people who benefit from the test, the people who just have an advantage that don't get impacted by those variables as much, it's a bit of an issue, right? Like it's not that difficult for you, but the kid sitting two rows in front of you could be struggling and might not even get into college, even though he knows what he's doing, right? But testing makes up such a big portion of your grade, and your grade makes up a 100% portion of what, almost 100%, not really 100, but a great portion of what colleges you get into, right? Like, and if you don't have good grades, if you don't have good grades, you're probably not getting into a good college, right?
Yeah. So let's go back to the SAT here. So SAT costs money to redo.
Yeah.
I think that's known.
Yeah, that's
But
absurd.
people that don't have good financial background that they can put forward to take the test again are relying on one test take.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, and that's another issue of the class divide, as we were talking about earlier with free education and student loans, right? Like, if we don't have, like, if we don't have an equal system, then we won't get the best workers. We could get, here, take 2 examples. There's Billy and there's Johnny, okay? Billy is from, let's go, Mexico, and he speaks barely any English, but he's really good at trigonometry, right? And so there's this trigonometry test, right? And so Billy is having a hard time reading the questions. But Johnny over here, he's been slacking off in the back of the class and has been looking at the wall, right? And hasn't been doing his homework. And Johnny's pretty good at English, and his parents hired him a private tutor. Now, so Johnny's been able to get an upper hand over Billy because of his background, even though Billy has been working so much harder. Sorry, I started there.
Yeah, so you said the class divide, it's gone. I feel like schools, at least where we are in North Carolina, have been slowly but surely trying to shrink that divide.
Yeah.
And COVID-19 has basically brought it back.
Yeah, like, right, like, if you don't have a computer, if you don't have a reliable power source, if you don't have reliable internet, if you don't have that type of stuff, then it could be an issue, right?
Mm-hmm. And also another thing with what you're talking about, private tutoring, that's another thing. That final test that you take, the SAT right there, to get into college, that's a big part of your grade for college. if you have a private tutor, you know how to take the test. You know shortcuts because the test is timed, and a lot of people don't have time to take. A lot of times students don't have enough time to finish the test. You will struggle because you don't know these shortcuts that were taught by a private tutor that your parents can afford. But the people that can't afford that, they might not do as well on the SAT, and they probably won't.
Yeah. So, yeah, if we learned really anything from this segment is that standardized testing is corrupted by a class divide that benefits the people who are on the upper hand, who have either just not really any mental diseases or any other obstacles that prevent them from doing a test, or have a wealthier background. But so it's meant to benefit those types of people, right? And if we don't do something about it, then we won't have maximum efficiency and the best people in our workforce. Because
So I feel like the divide will always be there. There will always be poor people.
Yeah, but
there will always be richer people. But I feel like what schools need to do is they need to try to give equal opportunity to both parties, both the rich people and the poor people, so they can equally do well when they're out of school, out of college, and they'll have equal chance.
Yeah.
And becoming that next millionaire, becoming this next politician, etc.
Yeah, and also having the symbiote will certainly help the economy and B, the workforce, because the more people who are actually good at this subject, the more people who didn't have to have a private tutor, the more people who didn't have to learn another language, the more people that have that are sorry, the more people that are good at their expertise are the better, because that means better technologies, and a better future.
Yeah, and then if you're really good at one subject, how about that's your job?
Yeah.
Okay, you're good at certain branch of math.
We need more.
Okay, now you're this mathematician, right?
Yeah.
Work at NASA.
Yeah. We need more professionalized stuff. So, Andrew, would you mind wrapping up what we talked about today?
Okay, so this is the end of episode 1 of our first podcast where we were talking about education.
On Teens Talk Politics.
Hopefully everyone tunes into the next one. And this was Teens Talk Politics.
Thank you guys so much for
Bye.
listening. Bye.